Awesome. Welcome back, everybody. This is Art Science Wonder. We're going to have a really cool episode today, like always. This time, we're going to talk about seasteading. We're going to talk about some cool new propulsion coming out, hence my awesome shirt, which is, it's not rocket surgery shirt that I got from like $6 tees or whatever, like a while back, and I've been meaning to wear. Um, and now have the chance. So that's fun for our viewers and for our listeners. We will be discussing some interesting topics today that, well, you know what? Let's just go ahead and get into it and stop with the blab, right? So the first one is going to be a little bit inflammatory sounding in the article title. It's Silicon Valley elites plan to quit land for floating cities. Which is very interesting, and we're about to find out why. So this is written on June 16th. So it was last month. We're going to be doing some of last month and like a little bit of the beginning of this month on this podcast today. So this is written by Margie Murphy for Telegraph, and I'm going to skip the first section of this article because I realize there are too many names I cannot say. They're foreign names. I cannot pronounce them. And also it's not as interesting as the later part of the article. So seasteading is a portmanteau, and I also probably mispronouncing that, describing a politically autonomous community built in international waters, has long held the appeal for people in Silicon Valley. A bastion, of libertarian values share an obsession with disrupting the status quo and decentralization. So, again, this article is a little bit charged politically. I don't like that, especially because this is, mostly about science, but I do not forego a little bit of politics because unfortunately it's a little bit in everything, right? So, anyway, the idea is now having a renaissance amongst the tech elite thanks to COVID-19. Its advocates claim tech workers, investors, and founders have found themselves untethered now that company headquarters have shut for the long term and have taken to fantasizing about exotic climes with easy living. Okay, so just a little bit of background on seasteading for me. Seasteading is a idea that has been thought of by scientists, by people who are interested in doing cutting edge research, all sorts of people. Okay, so not just Silicon Valley elites like this article is proclaiming. The draw to it is that in waters, of course, that are international, you can basically without taxes, without law, do some pretty cool things. Obviously, they could extend the laws to seasteading as well, which would maybe be good and bad because, you know, there's plenty of people who want to do, like, for instance, like ethical biotechnology. They want to kind of cut through all the BS and the paywalls of the FDA, which we talk about, and we'll probably talk a lot about on this channel when it pertains to politics, because of my background in biotechnology. Biotechnology. Sorry if it sounded weird or I pronounced it weird. But, the coolest thing about seasteading is that it's bioregenerative. You can put like ecosystems within it. You can have ocean water filtration. You could probably have like lots of cool marine life like integrated into the structures. I mean, the ideas for it are totally limitless in some ways, and it would also help us probably prepare for space as well, because of all the you'd have to do like a lot of fish farming and aquaculture and things like that. And so I think it's a great idea. Like, even if obviously even during COVID-19 these people are so rich that they can afford to do this, it would be good for overall humanity and science and progress. And the reason why is because, more up close, right at the borders of the ocean, we can really study the ocean, especially when you're within it. And a lot of these structures actually help with the formation of reefs as well. So, reefs tend to like attach to them, and it could be just a really cool environment for marine biologists and scientists to kind of do what they need to do a little bit uninhibited. Of course, nothing too crazy, okay? But I think it would be great. And the tech that could come out of something like this, where you have, a gathering of, people who have a lot of money, but also like smart people who they'll probably bring into this, to do science, etc. What could be really cool. Okay, so anyway, so it says people in tech hubs like Silicon Valley are looking at other places to live that are cheaper. And that makes sense too, because obviously we know that Silicon Valley, or not everybody knows, but Silicon Valley has a issue of, it's just overpriced. It's so overpriced that even the millionaires, right, supposedly are paying all the money they're making, the millions of dollars, into just living there. And who's to say this inflation couldn't eventually reach the seasteading? But, if they're paying for it themselves or funding it, obviously they're not going to charge themselves high rent, so, and that might allow some of that money that is literally just tied into, this perpetual system of living, or cost of living, that money could be freed up. And I think that is kind of what can spur innovation, is when the resources are freed to do what they do best, which is to flow, is to invest, to put that money into other things. So to me, this was probably one of the biggest of the few articles that came out last month, or within the last 20-ish days, because I really hope that they do it, and that they're able to manage it. It would really, a lot of innovation can come from this. Space research, longevity research, cancer research, because I believe that cancer research and longevity research are tied inextricably, and we'll definitely get into that very in depth in another video. And anyway, so that's kind of the gist of this. They say they're talking about how it says it right here. It was a plan that would have made Freeman's grandfather Milton, the Nobel Prize-winning economist advisor to Margaret Thatcher and libertarian figurehead, proud. Blah 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 blah. So politics again, right? But anyway, but the designs fell on to Peter Thiel, the PayPal founder. So he's kind of the one who wants to invest in it. And I've been hearing this for a while, and despite what people think of Peter Thiel, I think this is a great idea. So hopefully it'll happen. Maybe he'll fund it, and it obviously won't just be him, it'll be other people there. So innovators, thinkers, etc., etc. And so I don't really care who's paying for it, as long as it happens, and as long as some really cool tech and science come out of it, I am stoked. Anyway, so the next one is, talking about the environment. It says the new study predicts that ocean's ecosystems will collapse within a decade. So if they do create these, hopefully we can do some good for the ocean, study the ocean acidification, etc., and really get on this problem, because it's true. By the time that someone were to be done with seasteading, this could happen. A lot of innovations are supposed to come out within a decade, and for this reason, I don't think it's fast enough. We really have to be working in my opinion, right now at an exponential rate. My background in biology, my understanding of marine biology, all of it tells me that we are running fast towards a big extinction event. And it's not like I'm trying to be a fearmonger or whatever, it's just like I think like rationally that we probably really are, based on the data, based on what it takes to sustain life in the ocean. Hopefully the ocean life can evolve fast enough, but from what we're seeing is like it's really struggling. It's like they can't reproduce fast enough, a lot of creatures, to withstand these changes, and that's what's dangerous about all this. And we don't want to lose our creatures in the ocean, so let's talk about that. Okay, so this one was April 9th, 2020, so it's a little further back. This is by Dan Rabitsky, and it's on futurism.com. So the global ecosystem is in far greater danger than scientists previously thought, according to a new study. That's really saying something. The research predicts that without dire action to reverse global climate change, entire ocean ecosystems could suddenly collapse this decade. In this dire warning of as various organisms face temperatures higher than anything they have before, the study predicts sudden, massive die-offs. So the reason this isn't even too far-fetched, of course, is that we have seen plenty of beached animals, especially when you have the like bad algal blooms, where there's like pockets of anoxic water, and there's literally just, which means like there's literally no water in the ocean for the organisms to breathe, and so it's really not that far-fetched to think that this would be highly possible. So it says free fall. The study published Tuesday in the prestigious journal Nature examines the temperatures that 30,000 land and sea organisms can withstand, and plots those ranges against the expected temperature increase through the year 2100. It says as species hits their temperature thresholds, they may effectively vanish, and many are expected to do so at that time in what the researchers call abrupt exposure event. So it's not a slippery slope, but a series of cliff edges hitting different places at different times. And it says unless world leaders act to stop the direct effects of climate change, the study predicts a similar terrestrial die-off in the 2040s. Okay, so the reason they're saying terrestrial die-off is, for instance, 70% about, roughly, of the oceans, or of the Earth's oxygen, breathable oxygen, right? Well, obviously it's all breathable, right? Sorry. But anyway, most of the air we breathe, is what I'm trying to say, is subject to the oceans. And this is why. It's because most of the plankton and algae that live in the oceans actually produce 70% of the oxygen on Earth. So this is dire because obviously if, say, the oceans get so acidic and just nasty and have way too much plastic, etc. in them, and mostly it's about the pH, it's about the temperature, these microorganisms, if they die off, that would be terrible. That basically means another Permian-Triassic Extinction event, and I totally suggest looking that up, like especially if you are someone who you are trying to convince others that climate change, man-made accelerated climate change is what I typically call it, so that people don't get confused with weather and they understand that climate is different, hopefully, and that it's man-made accelerated, that it is a natural process. However, men, or humanity, I mean, are accelerating the process at an unnatural rate. Obviously, we have influence on our environment, right? So there's not much need to argue that, right? That we would influence our environment to some degree. We have an impact. But people, of course, still do, I guess. But if you look up the Permian-Triassic Extinction, this was a complete extinction event. I mean, this was all the insects died, everything died, and, you know, with the amount of time that we have left for our sun to basically turn into a red giant, we don't have the time to evolve another sentient or highly sentient life force, or person, people, thing, whatever it would become, again before that happens. So literally, Earth has humans. It has us, and that's it. So, we're it, guys. We're it. And if we die, that's the end of sentient life, and the possibility of becoming a multiplanetary species from Earth at all. So we really have to take this seriously. This is more important than anything going on right now, okay? Because this means everybody. This means the whole planet. So I really hope that we remember this, and we come back to this, that we don't forget about man-made accelerated climate change and all the crazy in the pandemic, in all the social issues that are happening right now. We must remember this is the number one issue, because it just is. This is survival. That's it. Survival. Will we make it? So anyway, I'm gonna do I'm sure a really long, in-depth, hopefully very persuasive video on climate at some point here in the future. And I'll go into all the data and everything that anyone wants to see or has questions about. So if you have questions about this topic, or concerns, whatever, just comment below, and I will make sure to add that in the notes for that video. So the next one is this is talking about a new method of recycling plastics. This is actually from the Czech Republic. A friend of mine from there showed this to me, and I thought this was really cool, because basically what they're doing, and there's a video, is this company is basically turning plastic back into oil and the components that it was made out of. So I thought that was really cool. Super dope. And they're actually wanting to do business with other recycling companies. So they will literally, if you want to call your representatives or your local recycling center and share these people with them, they're actually looking to sell this technology. And that's super cool, because especially in the United States, excuse me, I had a little tiny burp. Especially in the United States, we really need to improve our recycling centers. A lot of the methods, if you dig into recycling in America, the methods aren't that great. A lot of them, a lot of the recycling just sits there in squares, big squares of just compacted material and stuff, or bins of glass and stuff, and it never gets truly reused. And a lot of the time it gets shipped to other countries for them to deal with. And so I don't know if you guys saw, but I think it was last year, India or somewhere was rejecting our trash because they're hey, we don't want it anymore. And we're literally so I just saw a landfill in my area, being another one being built, and a lot of it has to do with there's no recycling in my area, and it's kind of ridiculous, honestly, because yeah, the United States, and when I've talked to people too, uh, about this, who are in this field, they say, yeah, like, our recycling isn't good enough in America. It's not. It's almost essentially non, like, functional, like truly functional, is what I keep hearing. And so, and also sometimes they just plasma the stuff. I mean, they literally just send trash basically through a plasma beam, like, and it vaporizes it. But we don't want plastic and all that, like, gas and everything that would be released from that in the air. That's essentially like a high-tech form of burning trash, right? So that's not what we need. We need to, revert it back to its original form. We need to reuse it. We need to, just get more advanced about this, because honestly, like, recycling always makes me think of that, like, scene in Futurama where he eats the sandwich and, like, finds out that the sandwich had been recycled. Like, but you would think that in 2020 we would have much better recycling, but we don't. And we're really behind on that. We can't just, eventually we're gonna end up starting to build over landfills, for people to live over landfills. I mean, we're just running out of space, man. We're running out, and we don't need to send it into space either. Like, that's really expensive, and I've heard that being proposed before. And yeah, we can't send our trash into space. It costs a lot of fuel and energy to just send up a satellite, That's not feasible. Stop proposing that, people. Anyway, so this is that company, Optimus Recycling, and I'm sure they would totally do business to business if you're willing to get in touch with them. So please do that if you have the time. I will be doing that as soon as I do. As soon as I can, actually. Okay, so the next one is pretty cool. It's about artificial brains, and how they need sleep to well, they'll explain it, but anyway, they need sleep too. And it says desperate AI researchers discover ways to stabilize neuromorphic processors. This is pretty cool. And it's written on June 9th, by Los Alamos National Laboratory. Okay, so it was probably a group effort. Sorry, it's getting late here. Okay, so states that resemble sleep-like cycles in simulated neural networks quell the instability that comes with uninterrupted self-learning and artificial analogs of brains. No one can say whether androids will dream of electric sheep, but they will almost certainly need periods of rest that offer benefits similar to those that sleep provides living brains. According to new research from Los Alamos National Laboratory, we study spiking neural networks, which are systems that learn much as living brains do, said Los Alamos National Laboratory computer scientist Ying Watkins. We were fascinated by the prospect of training a neuromorphic processor in a manner analogous to how humans and other biological systems learn from their environment during childhood development. Watkins and her research team found that the network's simulations became unstable after continuous periods of unsupervised learning. When they exposed the networks to states that are analogous to the waves that living brains experience during sleep, stability was restored. This is incredible, guys. This basically means that these neural networks are learning the way that we do. During the day, we expend a lot of energy, and all sorts of things are obviously going to be happening in our brains. And at night, we have to process that information because we learn so much, anyway, some of us as humans every day. And even those of us who are learning through experiencing things, interactions or whatever, they are still learning, no matter like how rudimentary it might be. And so, it says, The discovery came about as the research team worked to develop neural networks that closely approximate how humans and other biological systems learn to see. The group initially struggled with stabilizing simulated neural networks undergoing unsupervised dictionary training, which involves classifying objects without having prior examples to compare them to. Holy moly, this is crazy. The issue of how to keep learning systems from becoming unstable really only rises when attempting to utilize biologically realistic spiking neuromorphic processors, or when trying to understand biology itself, said Los Alamos computer scientist and study co-author Garrett Kenyon. The vast majority of machines learning, deep learning, and AI researchers never encounter this issue because in the very artificial systems they study, they have the luxury of performing global mathematical operations that have the effect of regulating the overall dynamic gain of the system. The research characterized the decision to expose the networks to an artificial analog of sleep as nearly as a last-ditch effort to stabilize them. Wow, this is insane. Okay, so they experimented with various types of noise, roughly comparable to the static you might encounter between stations while tuning a radio. The best results came when they used waves of so-called Gaussian noise, which includes a wide range of frequencies and amplitudes. They hypothesized that the noise mimics the input received by biological neurons during slow wave sleep. Wow. Okay, sorry, this is pretty exciting. The results suggested that slow wave sleep may act in part to ensure that cortical neurons maintain their stability and do not hallucinate. Oh my god. So that is why, like, that is just like our brain. I mean, that, you know, when you stayed up too long, when in studies where people stayed up too long, they literally begin to hallucinate. This, oh my god. I'm gonna try to contain my excitement. This is incredible. They're making humans, guys. This is really happening. I think that this is like the first time I ever feel certain that we are creating a new form of life. Holy moly, dude. Okay, so the group's next goal is to implement their algorithm on Intel's Lohi neuromorphic chip. They hope allowing Lohi to sleep from time to time will enable it to stably process information from a silicone retina camera in real time. If the findings confirm the need for sleep in artificial brains, we can probably expect the same to be true of androids and other intelligent machines that may come about in the future. Oh my gosh, androids will dream of electric sheep, guys. Oh my god. Watkins will be representing the research at Women in Computer Vision workshop on June 14th in Seattle. Wow. This is it, guys. We are almost there. We're maybe already there, is the truth. That is incredible. You guys just like process that, okay? Because I'm gonna literally be like dreaming about it. Okay, so this one is titled "The Rocket Motor of the Future Breathes Air Like a Jet Engine." And it was written on the 26th of last month, so near the end, 06/26/2020, by Daniel Alberhaus. There's a small airfield about a 2-hour drive north of Los Angeles. Okay, so this goes on for a little while. I remember reading this. So I'm gonna skip a little bit because it kind of is a little bit boring, the first part. Okay, so they're basically painting a picture of these two guys arriving in an airfield, and how they call their new type of propulsion method a cross between a rocket motor and a jet engine. So they call their creation the Fenris, and Davis believes that it's the only way to make getting to space cheap enough for the rest of us. Okay, it says, while a conventional rocket engine must carry giant tanks of fuel and oxidizer on its journey to space, an air-breathing rocket motor pulls most of its oxidizer directly from the atmosphere. So this means that an air-breathing rocket can lift more stuff with less propellants and drastically lower the cost of space access, at least in theory. Cool. So the idea is to combine the efficiency of a jet engine with the power of a rocket motor isn't new. And I know it's not new as well because I wanted to do something similar, or I've always wanted to do something similar to make jetpacks. So it says, but historically the systems have only been combined in stages. And it says Virgin Galactic and Virgin Orbit, for example, use jet aircraft to carry conventional rockets several miles into the atmosphere before releasing them for the final leg of the journey to space. In other cases, the order is reversed. The fastest aircraft ever flown, NASA's X-43, used a rocket engine to provide an initial boost before an air-breathing hypersonic jet engine, known as scramjet, took over and accelerated the vehicle to 7,300 miles per hour, nearly 10 times the speed of sound. Wow. So, but if these stage systems could be rolled up into one engine, the huge efficiency gains would dramatically lower the cost of getting to space. The Holy Grail is a single stage-to-orbit vehicle where you just take off from a runway, fly into space, and come back and reuse the system, says Christopher Goyne, director of University of Virginia's Aerospace Research Laboratory and an expert in hypersonic flight. So it says, the big challenge with a single stage to orbit, or SSTO rocket, is that achieving the speeds necessary for orbit, which is around 17,000 miles per hour, requires a lot of propellant, and that's true. But adding more propellant makes a rocket heavier, which makes it harder to reach orbital velocity. This vicious circle is known as the tyranny of the rocket equation. So there is an equation about this, and yeah, it basically just shows how to get more propulsive force, you have to add more fuel, which then adds more weight, and it is, when I have talked to pilots and things about, is there like, what's the next thing, for airplanes and stuff? They talk to me about this equation actually, or this issue, and it's kind of like it's an issue. So this could solve it. And it's why it takes two-stage rockets, the size of an office building, okay, to launch a satellite the size of a car. Which is just super inefficient. Is also one of the reasons why I wanted to maybe do at some point in my life a video or something, a paper, something about why rockets are ultimately have been really outdated technology. And I really wanted to do that article a few years ago in particular. Things are advancing, luckily, at least they've got reusable rockets, but when it comes to oh man, I still worry, everybody worries every time a human goes up in a rocket because of the explosive possibility. It's the best thing we have right now anyway, so it is what it is. It's not ideal, but I mean, the launch recently was amazing, so let's hope it just continues in that very safe trajectory. So staging a rocket helps because it can shed dead weight once the first stage's propellant is used up, but it's still pretty inefficient to have to burn all the propellant in the first place. This is where an SSTO rocket with air-breathing engines would provide a huge efficiency boost. So the idea is to use air-breathing engines earlier in the launch to take advantage of efficiency gains from engines that don't have to carry their own oxidizer. So basically would be breathing the air. And this is like something I was thinking about like with a jetpack like years ago. I was like, I need a jetpack that is like a hydrogen fuel jetpack with some type of like new carbon fiber. Like obviously it would be super dangerous though. That's like talking about safety, right? And like, come on. Still kind of a silly idea, which I knew it was. I still think it would be really cool, but probably just send a dummy up there. Probably not me. Cool, I'm flying a big mannequin. Yeah, it's like not as cool. So the idea is to use them so they're like, less heavy, etc. You kind of get the picture now. So this article goes on for a while. It's pretty interesting, especially if that's something you're into. But for now, for everyone else, we're gonna look at this explanation, or just kind of look at what is more explosive. So it turns out this guy did an experiment on a balloon, or on 3 balloons, and the first one had hydrogen, the second one had oxygen, the third one had hydrogen and oxygen, and the first one exploded, but it wasn't crazy. The second one just basically popped the balloon, and the third one was super explosive. So I guess this new technology that people are proposing is going to be kind of like the second one, except it will be more condensed, the oxygen. And this is what July 1st they talk about in an article on futurism by Dan Robitsky, and it's by another guy, but the idea is pretty much the same. So at least it sounds very, very similar. So it does make you wonder, like, who came up with it first, or how different is this technology. But it does seem different as well, a little bit. So this scientist says he built a jet engine that turns electricity directly into thrust. So it's kind of we'll see, right? Okay, so if this plasma propulsion tech is real, it could change everything. Is how the article talks about it. So this past autumn, a professor at the Wuhan University named Zhao Tang was hard at work piecing together a thruster prototype that at first sounds too good to be true. The basic idea, he said in an interview, is that his device turns electricity directly into thrust. And honestly, I think it reminds everybody of Anakin Skywalker's pod racer. So that's totally the first thing that came to my mind when it was like, oh, it's like a plasma engine. Oh, holy crap, that's like Anakin Skywalker's yeah, like it's totally his engine that he built. So I always loved the pod racing games, by the way. Like, if you guys ever played that as a kid, they were just they were like the best. They're my favorite racing games. I've, like, even to this day played, and I'm pretty good at racing games. Like, it's kind of weird, but I am. Let's see. But it makes sense though, because I wanted to be a pilot like forever. So, okay. So it says the basic idea, said in an interview, is the device turns electricity directly into thrust, no fossil fuels required, by using microwaves to energize compressed air into a plasma state and shooting it out like a jet. Okay, so this does seem kind of similar, but at the same time, it is fairly different. And that it's not just consuming oxygen. And the thing is, in the last article, and this is like, I'm just gonna be honest here, it was like a little bit confusing to me between these two, how they're talking about, okay, well, this one's gonna consume oxygen from the air, but how? You know, this one seems to like show the how. But still, it's a little odd. These two came out pretty like one right after the other. So by using microwaves to energize compressed air, which that totally makes sense, into a plasma state and shooting it out like a jet, Tang suggests, without a hint of self-aggrandizement, that it could likely be scaled up enough to fly large commercial passenger planes. So this is kind of what we are looking for when it comes to propulsion, like especially for jet planes, making something more environmentally friendly. The fuel from jets is extremely harmful to the environment. I mean, it's just like some of the worst. And we fly planes so much that if we could just switch them jet engines out, it would just, man. It's just something I've been looking forward to for like a long time. That and large boats, because boats actually pollute a crap ton as well. You didn't know, but there you go. Now you do. So let's see. So this is needless to say, these are grandiose claims. A thruster that doesn't require tanks of fuel sounds suspiciously like science fiction, like the jets on Iron Man suits in the Marvel movies, for instance, or the thrusters that allow Doc Brown's DeLorean to fly back to the future, quote unquote. There goes those jetpacks. Okay, but in Tang's telling, his invention, let's call it the Tang Jet, which he worked on with Wuhan University collaborators Dan Yi and Jun Li, could have civilization shifting potential here in the non-fictional world. Essentially, the goal of this technology is to try and use electricity and air to replace gasoline, he said. Global warming is a major threat to human civilization. That it is. Fossil fuel-free technology using microwave air plasma could be a solution. That it could. He anticipates this happening fast. In 2 years, he says he thinks Tang jets could power drones. In a decade, he'd like to see them fly a whole airplane. I'm worried, guys. You need to hurry up. Okay, that would all be awesome, obviously, but it's difficult to evaluate whether Tang's invention could ever scale up enough to become practical. And even if it did, there would be substantial energy requirements that could doom aerospace applications. So this one also goes on for a while, and I highly suggest reading it if you like this, but the last one is the last one for this episode. And I have done a lot of rambling sort of and talking in this, but I hope you guys have enjoyed it a little bit. I'll get more concise with it in the future, I promise. Okay, so was released July 3rd, so very recently. EGEB, Japan's new bullet train, has first lithium-ion battery, Li-ion battery self-propulsion system. And it's written by, I always don't know if it's Michelle or Michael. I always confuse that for some reason, but Michelle, I think, Lewis, or Michael Lewis, who knows. In today's electric green energy brief, it says a daily technical, financial, and political review analysis of important green energy news. I guess we've had like a lot of like a theme going here that I didn't realize. For last month's most important articles that I found. A lot of tech, a lot of green stuff. Okay, so Japan's new bullet train. Central Japan Railway Co. launched the commercial operation of its N700S bullet train on the Tokaido Shinkansen line between Tokyo and Shin-Okusen on Wednesday. It's the first fully remodeled bullet train in 13 years. The electric train can run up to 360 kilometers per hour, which makes it one of the fastest trains in the world, but its operating speed will be capped at 285 kilometers per hour. The train features a new active suspension system that helps absorb train movements. It also has a lithium-ion battery self-propulsion system, a world first, that will kick in during power outages and operate the train at a slower speed to get it to the nearest station. According to Japan Rail Pass, 4 of the N700S train's 16 carts will carry batteries on the underside of its cart carriages. This is a particularly useful feature if it's stranded in a high-risk area during a natural disaster such as an earthquake. The number of N700S trains in operation will increase from 4 to 40 by 2022. The CDC Group, which is the British government's development finance institution, will end fossil fuel financing abroad. It says it will invest only in companies that align with the Paris Agreement. Nice. Okay, so it will designate almost 1/3 of its spending to climate finance, The Guardian explains. So the publicly owned investor, which supports job-creating sectors in Africa and South Asia, will end financing for coal mining and oil and gas production, as well as newer existing power plants and refineries that use coal or heavy oil. Ooh, progress, guys. People are getting on board. They're realizing shit is serious. Okay. So CTC came under pressure once it came to light that more than $3 billion in public money has spent on polluting projects abroad since the UK signed the Paris Agreement. Oh wow, this is huge positive. This is a huge positive step since, of course, it doesn't make sense for the UK to simultaneously reduce its own emissions and fund polluting projects outside its own borders. However, it's still going to allow rare natural gas investments, despite the fact that environmental groups want CDC Group to only invest in renewables. The Guardian continues. A recent report in Energy in Africa by the International Energy IEA warned that some new investment in gas-fired power generation would be needed alongside a surge in renewable energy. But the impact on global climate emissions would be negligible. So anyway, well, that is interesting. And trains are awesome, and I think trains are totally underrated. We need to bring trains back to the United States because we have the perfect landmass for trains. I mean, we could seriously connect all of the US and at least the major cities like quite easily via high-speed, efficient trains. I mean, think about all the cargo we could carry. Like, that would be way more efficient than trucks. You know, and way less polluting than trucks in general, and get less just vehicles on the road that we could do. And also, like, there's so many cool ideas for trains that are still like pretty like rooted in the traditional train on a track. You know, it doesn't have to be like a fancy hyperloop or whatever. It can just be a train, but a highly efficient train with solar, with lithium ion, with all sorts of stuff. I mean, you know, why not? Why not? And there's plenty of cool ideas out there, and especially like emerging ideas as well for trains in general. I have friends who are working in emerging ideas for that. I mean, trains are awesome, and I wish we had super awesome passenger trains too, like in Europe. I've always wanted to ride trains around Europe. That's like still a dream of mine. Hopefully one day when the pandemic is over, and hopefully when the world still hasn't ended. So I probably better get on that in the next decade. Yeah, we got to keep working on this, guys. There's some good stuff coming, hopefully, and hopefully faster than they say. Yeah, this pandemic isn't helping. It's helped a little bit by keeping people at home, traveling less. That's been good, but it's just not enough. You know, we need to actually just change our systems. You know, everything. You're probably already a science enthusiast like me, so if you've waited this long. So I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast and that you found it enlightening and interesting. And of course, I will always include the sources in the descriptions below, my YouTube videos for this podcast, and that you enjoyed this. So I hope you have a wonderful day, night, evening, wherever you are in the world. Till next time.